Advancing to the third session of our seminar, discussing the topic Skill Transfer, Determining our Readiness Quotient, we have our keynote speaker, Dr. Rajdeep Manwani. He's an academician, trainer, motivational speaker, life coach, counselor, social change agent, and quiz master, par excellence both by training and by choice. He's working as a professor and coordinator in the Department of Commerce at Jain University and is a triple postgraduate with an MCom, MBA, and MPhil, and also a doctorate in commerce on the topic Strategic Evaluation of Training in Commercial Banks. He secured the gold medal for topping both the MCom and MPhil examinations in Mysore University. He is the recipient of the National Award as Role Model for Empowerment of Persons with Disability from the Honorable President of India in December 2013. He is the recipient of the Special Award given by Chief Minister of Karnataka in 2011 and the State Award for Excellence given by the Government of Karnataka in 2015. He is an eloquent speaker and holds the record for being adjudged the best impromptu speaker for 5 years in India and Sri Lanka for the years 2008, 2009, 2010, 2012, and 2015. He has been awarded the Distinguished Toastmaster, the highest award in the Toastmasters International. He has also received numerous accolades, including Rotary Award for Vocational Service in Education, GCS Foundation of Transformational Leadership Innovative Teaching Award in 2018, and the Guru Shrishta Award in 2019. He has also been featured TEDx speaker and has hosted several training programs, given motivational speeches, and held management talk shows on radio. He's keenly involved as a facilitator of several disability organizations at Bangalore and has helped in mentoring several students with disability in organizations and careers of their choice. He has paved the way for accessibility in several corporate campuses and has also worked extensively with social organizations to create a barrier-free physical, emotional, and social environment for persons with disability to thrive and express their potential. We cordially welcome you, sir. As discussants, we have Mrs. Vinita Malik, Principal, Delhi Public School, Bhopal, is a quintessential perfectionist in every aspect of her life. With a postgraduate degree in history and B.Ed, both from Mumbai University, she started her career as a teacher in the late 1990s. Since 2000, she has been associated with DPS Bhopal and has served the institution in various capacities. From October 2005 to March 2013, she functioned as the headmistress of the school. Due to her diligence and consistency in coordinating and conducting various Olympiads at DPS Bhopal, she has been receiving the Best in Charge Award from Science Olympiad Foundation for 4 years in a row. With the launch of DPS Kolar Road Bhopal in the session 2013-14, she was the optimal choice to head the new branch as its principal. In October 2012, she escorted a group of 20 students to Sydney, Australia for 10 days on a student exchange program conducted by Snowline Education at Hurlston Agricultural High School, NSW, Australia. Under her principalship, DPS Bhopal ranked number 10 in the country by Education World India School Rankings 2018 in day-cum-boarding category. DPS Bhopal is ranked number 2 in Madhya Pradesh by Career 360, India's Best School Rankings 2018. DPS Bhopal has also been conferred with Best School of the Year Award by the Federation of Madhya Pradesh Chambers of Commerce and Industries in collaboration with TCS ION for academic excellence. Shabdita Tiwari is the state topper of Madhya Pradesh with an aggregate of 99% marks in class 12th during the session 2017 and 18, which is the best till date. DPS Bhopal ranked number 7 in the country by Education World India School Rankings 2020-21 in day-cum-boarding category. being a firm believer in values of diligence, determination, dedication, and perseverance, Mrs. Vinita Malik takes life's challenges as a new learning experience that is meant to nurture her abilities and lead her on the path of success. We warmly welcome you, ma'am. And we have Dr. Chaturika Kanangara. She is an assistant teaching professor and an early career researcher at the Department of Psychology, University of Bolton, UK. She is also a registered counselor with BACP. Dr. Chaturika is a fellow with Higher Education Academy, UK. Her teaching areas are positive psychology and counseling. She has previously taught degree programs in India and Sri Lanka before starting HE sector teaching in the UK since 2014. Currently, she is leading a number of modules on positive psychology and counseling programs. Her primary research interest lies within the broad and developing domain of positive psychology applications in well-being. Her PhD focus is to develop a thriving dyslexia model where resilience and grit were two main focus areas of a theoretical model and intervention. She is currently conducting a number of studies with the aim of developing resilience and grit amongst university, college, and school students. She is now involved in one of the projects called Hummingbird in collaboration with other colleagues and a local charity. Hummingbird project delivers psychological well-being interventions to secondary and primary school children in the Northwest. Dr. Chaturika was the recipient of the Heinz von Foster Award 2013 and has also won other international awards for her contribution to research. We heartily welcome you, ma'am. I would now like to hand over the session to Dr. Rajdeep Manwani to usher in.
Thank you so much, madam. Am I audible?
Yeah. Before we start, I just want to lay out the structure of the session. Dr. Rajdeep, 20 minutes to you, and probably then our two discussants will take 10 minutes each, and then we'll follow with a Q&A from the audience who are sending the questions online. We'll read out the questions to you later. Dr. Manwani, please, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, madam. Thank you so much, madam, for that reminder. I know I had gone once to a talk and I kept speaking. I think so Shailaja ma'am knows that I love speaking. That's why she gave me that warning before itself. And I started speaking and speaking and speaking. And the person at the end who had to give the vote of thanks came up and said, Mr. Rajdeep is a very balanced speaker. What he lacks in depth, he makes up in length. So don't worry, madam. Within 20 minutes, I'll wind it up. It's absolutely a pleasure coming here. Talking about skill transfer and talking about us being ready for the skill transfer. When Shailaja ma'am gave me this topic, I did a little research and tried to find out where does learning and where does transfer of learning and skill transfer take place. And although I read many articles, there were two books which I found which were very, very interesting. One was a book by a professor of psychology from the University of New England. His name is Robert Haskell. He's written a book called Transfer of Learning, Cognition, Recognition, and Instruction. Very interesting book. And the other book is by another person who's a pioneer in disruption and innovation. His name is Clayton Christensen, although his TED Talk is famous for another reason, on measuring success. If anybody's seen it, it's got millions of views. But what does this skill transfer and transfer of learning take place, and how are we ready for it? So combining these two books, there was one interesting statement which was made by Robert Haskell in his book, and I want to pick up on that statement and talk about our readiness quotient and the transfer of skill, where it said, any transfer of skill and learning takes place at its optimum level when there is a development partnership between the facilitator and the learner. There is an addition of perspective and there is personal positive strokes along with positive expectations. So I loved this statement because it focused on three brilliant aspects where we as academicians and trainers and teachers have to get ready to transfer our skill. The first thing is any learning and transfer of learning takes place as a developmental partnership. There's a famous saying which goes that as a teacher or a facilitator, you're not a sage on the stage, you're a guide by the side. And I think so that's very, very important because there has to be a partnership. You're not at a level where you can enforce something, but you're at a level where you can transfer skill by partnering with the students. And when you partner with the students and how do you transfer the skill, the most interesting example comes of a mother. How does a mother transfer skills to her children? And I think so I'm going to keep this for all mothers. All of you all can relate with this, where how the transfer of skill takes place. If we can see how a mother teaches her child to walk, it's very interesting, isn't it? What happens is when the child is around 15 months old, he's just beginning to walk, but he's holding his mother's pallu or her churidar or her hand. And what does she do? The first thing she says is, "Beta, come on, leave my pallu, leave my hand." She encourages the child to move out. Correct? So the first thing is she gives a lot of encouragement. She becomes a person who's trying to encourage, come on, try it out on your own, try it on your own. And she urges the child to leave her hand or her sari or her pallu or a churidar, and the child leaves. So the first step in skill transfer which the mother tries to do is encourage. Then as the child takes those small pity-patty steps, what does she do? She applauds him for every step which he takes. She claps, "Wow, beta, fantastic, excellent." She keeps clapping, "Brilliant." And as a teacher, can't we become cheerleaders? Applaud them for every small skill they acquire. Applaud them for every little step they take. Applaud them for every small thing which they do right. And that encouragement of applause and cheering, you become an enthusiastic cheerleader. And the third thing which happens is, the child may not go on for long because he's just learning to walk. And what happens is he falls. And when he falls, what does the mother do? She gives him support. Does she go and slap him and say, "You idiot, you can't even walk for 2 steps, you fool"? Or what does she do? She picks him up, wipes his tears, she hits the floor and says, "Cha, dirty floor, dirty floor." Correct or no? And she gives him that support that it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay if you're fallen down when you have taken those small steps, because that is the learning process. And she supports him rather than criticizing him at that particular point of time, giving that support at the right time, at the right place for that student or for that child to learn. So you start with the encouragement process, you move on to the applaud and cheering them for every small achievement they make, and then if they are making mistakes or if they fall down, giving them support. But the support doesn't end there. How is the support given? That's also very important, because that is an important lesson in us to learn how the skill transfer takes place. When the mother has to pick up the child when he's fallen, does she hold her hand at her level, or does she bend down to the level of the student or the child? She puts her hand down to the level of the child. She bends to the level of the child where the child can hold the mother, isn't it? Isn't it? So sometimes as academicians, we think we are at a different skill level and we can teach whatever we want, being English professors, and we can use high funda words or maths at what level. But can we go down to the level of the child? That's important. Going down to the level of the child and holding him where he can hold the hand. That is important. Bending down to the level of the student when he requires that support, going down to their level of understanding and cognition is very, very important. And after that, what happens? Very, very interestingly, she holds his hand. Now, does she hold his hand very tight or very loose? Neither tight. If she holds it very tight, the wrist of the child will pain. If she holds it very loosely, the child will break off and fall again. So holding the child correctly with the right amount of pressure is important. If you're too strict, what happens is it pains the child emotionally, it pains the child in whatever way you can. So when you're transferring a skill, you don't have to overmanage or micromanage. Every small thing has to come under you. Hold him very tight. Every small thing which he learns, whether he's doing a lab experiment, whether he's doing a project, every single line, if you keep on micromanaging, the skill transfer doesn't take place because you're trying to overmanage. You're trying to hold the child too tight. But if you leave him loose, you do what you want, I'll give you the grades, then it becomes another headache because the child won't learn. He will try and copy, he will try and do because teacher's not going to see me anyway. So just holding the right pressure at the right time becomes very, very important. Neither holding the child too tight, nor too hard. And finally, when the child starts walking along with her mother, does she walk at her pace or does she walk at the pace of the child? At the pace of the child. She doesn't. She can take 2 steps at a time, but the child will take small, small steps. Some children want to run. Some children want to go slow. The mother will run when the child runs. The mother will walk slowly when some children are fast learners. You might have to just feed them a little extra and give them a little extra homework so that they can get the transfer to them at the right time. Some children learn a little slowly. So might be hold a little extra time with them and take child time out with them and learn. So that developmental partnership, I thought the ideal example was the mother, isn't it? Right from the time of encouragement, till applauding them and cheering them, till giving them support and giving them support at their level, not micromanaging, holding them too tight or too fast, and finally going at the pace of the learner is so very important. Another example which I want to think of my mother as I'm talking about it, it just struck my mind. When we talk about the mother teaching a skill, I remember when my mother was teaching my sister how to make curry. What did she do when my sister went into the kitchen for the first time? The first thing was plan and check. Plan and check in the sense, the mother will tell the daughter, you put this much dal, you put this much water, all of you all will identify with this much curry leaves, this much salt, this much masala, correct or no? And she plans and she checks every quantity of what is being added to that curry. And she is there with the learner all the time. My sister learned, she told, okay, this much salt for this 3 people, this much of, so you're planning and checking at every point of time. And this happens with students also. You plan, you check with them when they're just learning. All of you all know the 4 stages of the learning curve. I'm not going to go into this because Shailaja ma'am has warned me 20 minutes. Okay, so in the first stage of the learning curve, when there is conscious incompetence, you have to plan and check at every point of time because they're learning a new skill. They're learning something, so you'll plan and check at every point of time. And what happens after that? The second thing is check in trouble. Then my mother says, okay, I've taught you 2 or 3 times. Now you make it. If you find that there is something going wrong with the made curry, you call me. So suppose the curry is going black or it's coming to another color, which it shouldn't be coming because it's becoming too hard or too soft or something like that. You tell me. So the second thing is check in trouble. Give them the autonomy. Give the child the autonomy to do their work and check only when they are in trouble so that they can come back to you at that particular point of time. The third stage is supervision, over supervision, not even checking in trouble, but supervising. She says, now you make that, you have called me 2 or 3 times. Now you make the curry on your own. And casually my mother will go to the kitchen to drink a glass of water. She'll look over the shoulder of my sister and see whether the curry is coming right or not. Just supervising. So just keep an eye on the child when he's actually implementing the skill and going through that skill at that particular point of time. And finally, autonomy and responsibility. My mother will announce to my sister, okay, tomorrow guests are coming. You only have to make the curry, nobody else. Because the first 4 times the father was the bakra. He ate all that burnt curry, he ate all that one with extra salt. Now the guests are coming, so you can try. Correct or no? So at the last point, give them that autonomy, give them the responsibility to take over. So this entire process, plan and check in trouble, supervise, and then give them the autonomy and responsibility can be viewed as another model for skill transfer, all on the perspective of developmental partnership. Second thing which I liked in that definition, in that aspect of transfer of learning, was the perspective. As a person, as a facilitator who's trying to transfer and seeing whether we are ready, are we adding perspective and creativity to the children, or are we adding only knowledge? Because knowledge is freely available, right? You Google it out, you get it. But are you giving a different perspective to the child? That's important. That's very, very important. I remember, I'm going to talk about two perspectives here very, very quickly. When I was in my class in physics in my 7th or 8th standard, our teacher came up to class, and what she did was she took a A4 size sheet of paper and she showed it to us. And she took another A4 size sheet of paper and she showed it. She said, "Is the weight of both of these papers the same?" We all shouted, "Yes, ma'am." Then she did something else. She weighed it on a weighing scale. There was a small scale, weighing scale, which she had bought, an ultra sensitive one. She put it, the first one was 3 grams, the other one also was 3 grams. Fantastic. Then she crumpled one paper in front of us and she said, "Now I've crumpled one paper and the other paper is normal. Do you think the weight is the same?" Everybody said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Let's check it out." She put the plain paper on the weighing scale. It was 3 grams. But when she put the crumpled paper, it was 3.2 grams. She said, "Oh my God, how did the weight increase?" And then we were forced to think. And somebody said, "Yes, ma'am, I think so. The air got trapped, right? She said, "Yes, brilliant." So don't look at things like that. When the crumpled paper carries a little more weight. And that was a perspective. We learned mass, weight, and density in a new way. My English teacher, she was explaining to us a Greek philosopher called Socrates. And she said, the Greek philosopher Socrates said, "All Greeks are liars." And she said, this is a classic example of something called as a paradox. If all Greeks are liars, then even Socrates is a liar. That means what he's telling is not true. That means Greeks are truthful. But if Greeks are liars and Socrates is not, then it is true. Is it true or false, the statement? Now we all got confused. And she said, this is a classic example of paradox. The example still stays in my mind because there was a perspective given, a new perspective. When you're transferring learning, you're transferring the skill, are you adding that little bit of creativity in your class to give a different perspective? And perspective doesn't mean only in the academic sense of learning something. When I lost my eyesight in my 8th standard, it was a very dark moment for me. Okay, it was because I was a school topper. I used to always get 97%, 98, 99. I was a fantastic cricket player. I was a very good fast bowler. And then suddenly I got this disease called RP, retinitis pigmentosa, where the rods and cones of the eyes deteriorate, and I lost my eyesight. And it was a very dark period because it was very, very difficult for me to adjust at that period because I was a voracious. And those days we didn't have technology like we have now for the blind, because now we have the computer which speaks. The society is more inclusive. We are blessed now. Okay. But in those days, it wasn't that. And I was very, very upset. And I remember I was sitting in class one day in my 8th standard. I was sitting in class. I had lost my eyesight towards the end of my 8th standard. And I was sitting in class brooding because I was listening to children playing cricket outside. It was a tea break. And I was in my heart of heart cursing myself and cursing, why did this happen to me? And we had this biology teacher called Mr. Alexander Nainen. We had our tea break usually from 10:40 to 11:10. And I was sitting in class quietly, and at 11 o'clock, Mr. Nainen, whose class was at 11:10, came to the class. He immediately came, huffed and puffed his way into the class, came, sat with me, put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Rajdeep, do you know what?" I said, "What, sir?" He said, "I've read a poem yesterday, and I wanted to read it out to you." He held my hand and he read out a poem. Look at the poem and I'll tell you what perspective it added to my life that day. The poem goes like this. The poem, I'll just read it out, I'll just tell it to you. The poem goes that in life's roads, whenever things are tough, you have to take it up in the right stride. That was the gist of the poem. And he read it out so well, he read it out so excellently, that at that point of time, when he read it out to me, I was feeling so happy that this man had read out a poem to me, not being an English literature teacher, not being a person who was at all connected with English, but he read it out in that way. He read it out in a way that made me feel that even when life is tough, you have to take the right stride and you have to, and he was not my English teacher, but he gave me a perspective of life in a different way. So that is perspective. You're adding a perspective to the idea of a person. So that perspective can be added when you're transferring learning. Might be about a life difficulties, reading out a poem to a student, not even being at a part of the student. It just showed his compassion. It showed his aspect of being a little more caring for the child at that particular point of time. Okay. So now that was the second thing, the perspective. The third important aspect is, when does transfer of learning take place, is when there is personal positive strokes and expectations. I was listening to the seminar, the previous one, the panel discussion, and there was something very interesting. How do you manage personal attention? And actually, when Clayton Christensen wrote his book, Disrupting the Class, he said the only reason why skill transfer doesn't take place is because each of us are at different stage of learning. Some are visual, some are audio, some are but we have a general factory model of imparting education. Can we tune it to be a little personal? And I always tell this, teaching without the student in mind is like writing a love letter to whomsoever so concerned. And teaching is not a floodlight, it's a spotlight, isn't it? There was a very famous management guru called Charu Rangnekar. He used to always say that if you want to teach mathematics to Ramu, it's not enough if you know mathematics, but it's more than enough if you know Ramu. And that is so very important. It's so very important that you keep the student in mind while transferring the skills. Some student might be, as I told in the earlier part of the talk, keeping the student in mind. What are they interested in? What can make it a little more interesting for that personal student, with positive strokes and positive expectations? I think so. I'll end with this. Positive strokes and positive expectations make a very big impact on the transfer of learning and we being ready to be as great teachers. There's a true story of a school in Atlanta where there was this principal. It was a school at the suburbs of Atlanta, and there was one class of students who weren't very good at all. They were very backward in their academics. They were extremely notorious. They used to tease the teachers, and no teacher was ready to go to that class. And the principal called up one of the teachers who had just retired. Her name was Mrs. Sara, and he said, "Madam, can you please come back to this class and teach this set of students?" Mrs. Sara was a little reluctant. He said, "Please, ma'am, we'll find a replacement next year, but this year you have to come back and teach this class." Now, this teacher, Mrs. Sara, she came back to class and something wonderful happened. Suddenly, the grades of the class started improving. The class grades started improving. They started doing extremely well. From D, E, and F, they became A, B, and C. Their behavior became a little better. They started taking part in extracurricular activities. They started respecting the teachers. And by the end of the year, that class was voted as one of the best classes in the whole school. And the principal was thrilled. He held a felicitation ceremony for Mrs. Sara, and he called all his friends, the school teachers, the parents, the students, and he announced on stage, "Mrs. Sara, you're a miracle worker. You're a magician. You transformed a class of hooligans into one of the best classes in the whole school. Can you tell us what you did?" And Mrs. Sara came on stage, and she very gingerly she came and she said, "No, sir, I didn't do anything. I wasn't anything. It wasn't that I did anything. It was you had sent me the list of the students at the beginning of the year. And next to the list of each name of each student, you had mentioned their IQ scores, intelligence quotient scores. Normal IQ is 90 to 110. And she said all the students had very high IQ, above average 115, 117, 121, 122, 119. And all these students were so intelligent, I just gave them the respect they deserved. I just treated them the way they were. They were so intelligent, so I had to give them the respect, and that's what. I didn't do anything. They just lived up to their potential. The principal nearly fell off his chair. He said, "Madam, those were not their IQ scores, those were their registration receipt numbers." But something beautiful had happened. Because the teacher had expected the best, she treated them with that much respect and that much positivity and with that much stroke which she gave them. Suddenly the class started living up to her expectation. So just to end, I know I've talked a lot. Skill transfer takes place through a developmental partnership. It takes place by adding a new perspective. It takes place when you have personal positive strokes and expectations. And I gave you several examples. So I would just like to end by this with one small perspective in my life. So when I was in my 12th, I took up statistics. And I found it very difficult to understand one concept called theoretical distribution. You know, that normal distribution, a bell-shaped curve, I can't see. So it was very difficult. And all the teachers told me, leave that chapter. Now just see how skill transfer takes place. One of the teachers, Dr. Vigneshwar, he called me to the staff room one day in the afternoon and he said, "Rajdeep, don't worry about normal distribution. I will teach you normal distribution." I said, "Okay." You know what he did? He kept a towel on his head from the left side to the right side and he made me touch it like this. And he said, "Dekho, this is the bell-shaped curve and this, the nose is the mean, median and mode." That transfer of learning through haptics, learning through touching was such a big experience. My fear of statistics was removed that day. After that, I've published how many papers? I've done 2, 3 minor research projects, all using statistical tools, all because there was somebody who was willing to transfer skill through a partnership, adding perspective and having the positive expectation that even if a person is visually impaired, he can learn statistics. With that, I would like to hand it back to the moderator. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. It was really impressive when you explained how to support failures by bending down to the level of the learner to pick them up and understanding that the learner requires support too. That too with the right amount of pressure and pace. Your insights have been really vibrant and engrossing. With this note, I would request Mrs. Vinita Malik to commence with the discussion.
Thank you so much. At the outset, I would express my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Shailaja and the entire team at JLU and all the resource persons, the worthy panelists who are part of the seminar, the day's seminar today. And last couple of hours I have been attending and it has been really insightful and a lot of new learning and skill transfer has happened as far as I am personally concerned. And Dr. Rajdeep, I am sure that we all who have been listening to you for the last 15 minutes or so, I think though the time frame given to you was 20 minutes, but there was more craving to have more from you because the different examples, and those were examples which are so easy to connect. And giving the example of a mother and how the mother gives a strong hand holding to the child, to a toddler, by giving that support coming down to that level. And just summarizing the entire concept of skill transfer, summarizing it by picking up 3 important concepts of putting it across in this manner. I think a lot of ifs and buts which as teachers we all had, you have put them across to each one of us, and whatever we gather from here, we are actually going to implement it because this is a challenge for the entire teaching fraternity, that we need to keep the flame of knowledge and the flame of learning continuing. It's not a one-day process. It's not something readily available in the books. That times change and you need to adapt to the change. It's not a formula that 2 + 2 will always be 4. It is something that you need to pick up. You need to tie all those loose ends. You have to string together the different beads which are available around us. And that is how I personally take it, because 1.5 years, if not very far, we can pick up from the very recent situation that we all are as academicians, as teachers. 1.5 years ago, if we go back, we will always be remembered as part of that important chapter in the history of mankind, where as teachers we could only imagine a classroom situation where the child or a group of children, they are present in front of us, and chalk and duster, and at the most going in sync with technology, the smart classes. Beyond that, we could never think of, and rather we never probably didn't want to think, because this is human nature. We want to live in our comfort zone. But I think the pandemic, if of course full of negativity, but there are certain positive outcomes also. Had this situation not been there, we would never have dared to plunge into this kind of a scenario. I remember all of a sudden when there was closure of schools announced. Earlier when it would happen, it was simply closing down the school for various reasons, one day, maybe more than a day or something. But down the line, whatever we did, it was a big question that struck us, that now what? So as coming back to what you said, the perspective had to change. We had to analyze that situation from a different angle, that it cannot go on for days together and we cannot stand and wait for instructions. We have to plunge into action. So there came the new perspective, what next? So what next made us think? And when we started thinking, we started exploring. And when we explored, we discovered a system that how to connect with our students, how to keep knowledge continuing. And what a beautiful innovation of a human brain, I must say, that today this seminar itself is an example that we are all so many people connected from across the globe, and we are attending and learning from each other. This was possible because probably the situation that we were into due to the pandemic. Otherwise, attending seminars or workshops was being physically present there. So you gave us a lot of takeaways from your pearls of wisdom, and I'm sure that as teachers, the examples that you have quoted, we have new learning and how to transfer the skill, because preparing our generation, the next generation, they are new age generation. They are not going to be satisfied with the cognitive development only. We have to focus on the social, emotional, and most importantly, the psychological aspect. Something that you mentioned, the positive connect, that hand holding by the teacher, that getting into the situation where the teacher was put into a batch along with a batch of students who everybody else had given up. So again, you shared your own example that the poem that was shared with you by one of your teachers changed your perspective to life, and you took statistics as a challenge. I can also relate. I was immediately reminded of my own school days. Maths was a subject which I would always had a phobia, because probably never got that right kind of a direction, or maybe that motivation, the support coming down to my level and to give me the support. I may have been good in other subjects, but not maths. But there was my class teacher who called me to the staff room and said that you have been scoring so well in all the other subjects, but not in maths. But this definitely is going to disturb your overall score. I think that was required, or that is all that was required for me. That was the day which I can never forget in my life, that I started wondering, in a class of 40, does she remember that there is a child who doesn't fare well in maths but fares well in all the other subjects? I think that one pat and one statement of that teacher made the difference. And I got back home and I expressed my concern to my dad. And then my parents played the role of supporting me. And with a lot of pride, I wish to share with all of you that one statement of that teacher made such a big difference that when my scores came, I scored the maximum in maths. And my approach towards the subject changed. Of course, I never went ahead with the subject. I went into a different field. So what I see, the whole scenario as far as skill transfer is concerned, definitely as teachers, we have a lot of learning, and we we are the role models. We have to be the role models for our children, and we have to prepare and gear up the generation for the new challenge. And I'll just end up by sharing few lines from Nelson Mandela. Our children are the rock on which our future will be built. The rich potential in each child must be developed into the skills and knowledge our society needs to enable it to prosper. So we have to give them that strong hand holding, that support coming down to their level, changing our perspective, that it is not the marks that make a difference. It is the overall personality. We have to prepare them to face the challenges at their workplace, during their leisure time, during their social scenario. We have to groom them and prepare them to deal with all life challenges so that their life skills are enhanced and they become well-groomed, well-rounded personalities. I rest my point here. Thank you so much for giving me this platform to express my views.
Thank you, ma'am. It's true that teachers could only imagine a classroom session, but the pandemic made people understand different dynamics of teaching by changing our angles both physically and psychologically. It was actually a truly illuminating expression. I would now request Dr. Chaturika Kanangara to initiate the discussion.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Shalja ma'am, Dr. Shalja Shastri and JLU team for inviting and giving me the opportunity to be here. And I would like to start my conversation, first of all, thanking for Dr. Rajdeep and Mrs. Vinita Malik. Especially the talk by Dr. Rajdeep was a great opening, and it was very much connected to the work that I am doing with my research work and also the work that I practice over here. Especially the partnership element, the developmental partnership, because in the UK, this is what we champion about now. We don't do anything without our students being partners. Our students are partners. We are not allowed to do any projects without us having the consultation with our stakeholders. We are not supposed to change our curriculum without students being able to comment about it. Even from going from the primary to secondary to college education to university, our students are our partners. And very rightly, giving the knowledge, it's not anymore the role of the teacher, because the knowledge is there, freely available. Very rightly, Dr. Rajdeep has mentioned. We are not that encyclopedia or the thesaurus to pass information to our students. So we become facilitators. The new generation of teachers are the facilitators. So the positive stroke perspective, that individual touch, I'm going to bring back all of these concepts into some of the areas that I have been working on to see the synergies between the talk delivered by Dr. Rajdeep. So I was going to talk about the 4 ingredients that we champion in the UK in the school education, in the college education sector and university sector, to talk about how ready we are to skill transfer, how ready we are with the change as teachers, and then where do we begin. So we begin with few factors such as grit, growth mindsets, character education, resilience. And some of my work since 2016 to now, we have narrowed this down to 2 factors. That's tenacity and self-composure. So if we can find students, or if we can train students to be tenacious and self-control, I think they are ready for the change. But in order to do that, the first question, the very first person who talked about grit and perseverance is Angela Duckworth. And she talks about, if we want our students to be gritty, the teachers has to be grittier. We have to be persevering first before we train our students to be grittier. And that personal touch is so important in this process. This is why I was really pleased to hear all of this. And how do we achieve in the UK? One of the things that we do is the character education. And I was involved in some of the national teacher training programs, especially with one element that is training teachers to be gritty and growth-minded. And then how do we bring in correct education into classroom? And one of the things that we talk about is curiosity. We have students very distractive in the class and really disturbing and really creating a lot of trouble in the class and a lot of behavioral problems. And in the world of positive psychology, we look at this as those students are extremely curious. You want to explain them why they are so disturbing in the class? My way of looking at it is they are very curious. And they're very chatty. They would tell a lot of things, sometimes relevant, sometimes irrelevant, or they're constantly disturbed. Why? There is a question why. The why is they are very curious, but the curiosity is not presented or channeled in the right way. So can we bring them back to that curiosity to be optimized? This is what we do with correct education. So what we did over the pandemic, that was a great call for everybody to start looking at different perspectives. It was a very traumatic period for parents, for teachers in the UK, just as any other place in the whole world, because we just didn't know what we could do to help our students. How do we transfer? We had teachers, including in university, we had teachers who didn't know to use the technology. But now all of a sudden, I remember the day that we closed the university on a Friday, and then from Monday onwards, we were back on teaching online, which we never wanted to. We didn't want to do anything to do with online teaching because we always championed about we are not an online provider. But then all of a sudden, everybody were forced to, including schools. So what do we do? So there is always a group of people who would champion about different technologies, and there is always a group of people who wouldn't like to. So what do we have to do? One thing we did with schools, this was part of the Hummingbird project that which was included in the introduction when I was introduced. So what we talked about is how ready we are. Can we train students, teachers, and parents to be receptive of this information? So where do we begin with this positive stroke? The positive stroke, we started equally working with students as well as the teachers and parents, because now parents became partners of this process, because the learning journey was all of a sudden became a very holistic. In the UK, usually parents are very, very less involved in the process of teaching directly into them, because we hardly have any homework before the pandemic, because everything happens in the school and then they come, and because it's a very late ending to the school day normally. So except a little reading task, we hardly have any homeworks in the UK. But all of a sudden, the parents became teachers, and parents had to use their skill set of technology, or they may had, or they may not had. So we began training the teachers and the parents on these positive, how do we bring in these positive strokes, bringing in character strengths, correct education, and going down to the level of your child or your students, and then hand holding of them. So this is, I think I'm nearly probably at the end of my time. So I just would like to summarize the 4 ingredients I would share with to promote the positive stroke among the trainers, I would call parents or teachers or everybody. Grit, growth mindsets, correct education, resilience. And thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Indeed, we are not the facilitators. We are not the books full of knowledge that passes the information to the learners, but we are the facilitators. And curiosity really leads to more knowledge, especially when it is directed towards the right path. Ma'am, your words have been extremely enchanting. Thank you so much. I would now like to hand over the session to Dr. Urvashi Datta to begin with the questions put up by the audience.
So I'd like to put the first question across to you. We've been talking about developing the skills of the Generation Z. Isn't it important to have participation of the learners themselves in this process? Throughout the seminar, we've been talking about how we want to build up all of this skill set that they have, the capabilities that they have. Are we paying enough attention to what they want rather than paying attention to what we perceive they want or they need? And that's open to any of the speakers who want to address it.
Very true. In fact, I mentioned that when I said, right, that if you want to teach mathematics to Ramu, it's not enough if you know mathematics. You have to involve them in the entire process. Because if you engage them by just passing on information, they may not learn. But if they actually are involved in the whole thing, just like if you're going to teach somebody swimming, you can't teach them by correspondence, right? You tell them put your left leg out and then you tell them jump into the water. The next day you'll have a holiday in your school, right? So you have to involve them, hold them, tell them this has to be done, unless you involve them. So skill transfer is always a practical experience where you actually go with the learner and his pace. I already told you that. I'm just going to tell you another incident which happened. I was teaching I'm teaching now also in Jain University, and I was invited to a place in Mangalore, St. Aloysius, Mangalore, where I studied in a college called St. Joseph's College. So the principal had got transferred to St. Aloysius, Mangalore over there, and he was in the evening college. So I wanted to pay respects to my guru, Father Walter Andrade. So I went to meet him. So when I went to meet him, he asked me, Rajdeep, what are you teaching? I said, sir, I'm teaching financial management, income tax, marketing management, and organizational behavior. He paused for a little while and then he looked back at me and he said, Rajdeep, stop teaching financial management, marketing management, income tax, and organizational behavior and start teaching students. And I got such a slap on my face. Correct? Unless if you're focused, if you're subject focused, you only do that. But if you're focused on the students, it's always a partnership.
Thank you so much, sir. Vinita ma'am, I would like to put the same question across to you since you manage a school and you have such a vast experience in school education. How, while implementing the changes that are coming into the education policy with everything, how much are we able to actually implement this in the school system?
Thank you for your question. Yes, implementing it in the school system is a challenge in itself. But being a public school, there is a lot of involvement of the children into various aspects of our school system that we follow, and the involvement of the parents also. So basically, it is keeping them into what you plan and evolve for them. So if they are equally partners into it, I think the outcome always is relevant and fruitful, because it's more of responsibility and accountability. And the perspective quotient here, that the approach is that we are also equally contributing to the planning and policy making of this particular situation. So we need to give our 100%, and definitely we'll be responsible for the outcome. And there is more of, you can say, the involvement of all the stakeholders as far as our school is concerned, and all our teachers are facilitators. So coming down to the level of the children and trying to understand what is the reason. If has to be a behavior which has been observed or a situation which has been observed, our role is to find out what is the reason behind it, because something has to be there behind it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that. My second question, although this question was posed in one of the previous sessions, I'd like to put it forward in this session. When we talk about skill building in learners, it is equally essential to be fostering skill building in the teachers. They need to be equally creative. They need to be having that learning perspective to themselves also, because if they don't grow, if they don't work ahead, it's difficult for them to foster that same lifelong learning attitude in their children. So are the policies that are being drafted able to address this issue? It's open to any of the three speakers who would like to answer.
Chatrika ma'am, you want to answer?
Yeah, I can have a go, but probably I'm less knowledgeable about the Indian context. But I can share about in general in what happens in here and what happens in the US. I would like to give an example of what happens about teacher trainings and what we do to enhance the skill set. So one of the programs that run in the US is the Chicago School training program. So what they do in this particular program is a behavioral management program, but that is for teachers. What the program indicated is those who have had this head start with this particular training program, their classrooms indicated a very high level of emotional control in the classroom and a very high level of executive functioning in students. So definitely we start with the teacher. Like Angela Duckworth says, if you want your students to be gritty, we have to be grittier. So that's where we begin. So our training programs and keeping up to date with everything is very important. When we are, I think it's also a learning curve from partnerships, because every partnership work that I have done with my students, I've learned a lot in the classroom, outside of the classrooms, in projects. They bring in an enormous amount of information from ongoing Gen Z generation. So you get lots of information from them, because then we become learners, and it is a mutual partnership. And I think it's really important that we foster the attitude of training the teachers in that right level, or being open to the new learning and ongoing learning.
I would like to add to this that we also firmly believe that a facilitator, she or he is not only facilitating the teaching learning process, but is also learning in the process. As I mentioned earlier also, it's not a one-day thing, done and finished and put it aside. It is an ongoing process, a growth mindset. So the teacher herself or himself has to be a role model for the children and can't afford to be complacent, because you have to be, it's a, you can say, a question of survival of the fittest. So the way that tide changes, you need to set your sail accordingly. You just can't be having a pre-decided goal or objective in mind, and then we keep on sailing and we're not bothered about the tide. Then the end result definitely is going to be disastrous. The fact that you have been trained and groomed to set your sail accordingly, that is what ensures that you have a smooth sail even in roughest of the weathers. And that is what exactly happened with our teachers. When the situation arose, something that we were dissuading, that we will never let technology replace a teacher. But ultimately, we all took it into our stride, and that is what was the need of the hour. So we adjusted our sail according to the need of the hour. And for that, whatever strong hand holding was required for the teachers, as one of the panelists mentioned, that not necessarily everybody was trained and equipped to deal with technology. But yes, we rose to the occasion and we adapted to the change. We adopted the use of technology, and we groomed by attending various sessions planned by CBSE, planned by our own management, and at our individual levels also, because we wanted to keep ourselves equipped and not complacent that, okay, these days will also pass and then we'll again be back into our own conventional way of teaching and learning. No, we are all set for the hybrid model.
Ma'am, do you have time? I'll take this, or we'll wind it up here. Should I speak a little bit about this?
Yes, sir, definitely.
Okay, I think so. What's the time, ma'am? Do you have enough 2 minutes or something?
So we have about a minute or two.
Yeah, so I think so we'll wind up with this. Good. Okay, so there's a very famous author from the US. His name is James MacGregor Burns. In fact, there is an Institute of Transformational Leadership which he set up, and he's given a very interesting definition of transformational leadership. He says that every moment of your life, you have a chance either to be an example to somebody else or a warning to somebody else. Whenever you choose to be an example to somebody else, you are embarking on a journey of transformational leadership. And I want to tell you the same thing. As a teacher, the most important thing to realize is that we can be transformational leaders if we are examples to our students. The number of nerves which go from the brain to the eyes are 8 times more than the number of nerves which go from the head to the ear. So if you are going to tell lies to your students, I'm going to give you the paper tomorrow, and you haven't corrected the papers, and if you don't do it, your student is learning that this person is teaching us not to commit. So every time, if you are on the road on the teacher, and if a person crosses your road and you scream at him, the student will look at you. If a teacher can scream, even I can scream. I always tell this, means if you're going on the road and it's raining, you're an umbrella, go and call somebody else, because somebody will see you there. Some student will see you, and he's learning empathy at that particular point of time. In our college, Jain University, we have an 8-story building, okay? And when the lift is going up, everybody is in a hurry to go to the 4th floor, 5th floor. This is before the pandemic. Now the student is running towards the lift. Some students will say, chalo, chalo, band kar dete hain, we'll close the lift. I tell them no. Even though I can't say they're discussing, I'll put my leg in the middle and I'll say, let that student come. It's not okay if you go 2 seconds late. Small examples like this show that you're concerned about somebody else. So if you want to do something in life, do it yourself first. Be an example. I'll end with a small incident. There was a boy who was asking his elder brother, Bhaiya, why do we always say ABC, ABC? Why don't we say ACB, ACB? And the elder brother told something very interesting, and I think so it's a lesson for all the teachers. He said, first you have to be, only then you can see. First you have to be, only then you can see. I think so we should end with this.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much to all the speakers for all their scintillating views. You've made the discussion such a lively one. As we march towards the 4th session of the day on preparing school students for the new world of work, I would like to invite Mr. Samyak Chakravarti to take the session forward.